Hazel, my wife and sister, are in a Facebook war, and the debate is, who is the better daughter? And my parents have been deceased for 11 years, and my wife's parents have been deceased for 2 decades. So it's like, why does it matter? And Hazel, do you think an American's going to win that argument?
Yeah.
You think?
No.
Yeah. Now, last time, Hazel, I changed my lock because I changed from a red deck to a blue deck, and I played with you instead of Mr. Distinguished here. So now that the streak is being broken, I'll go back to the front. That's the interview day.
I just started here. Or prepared thing.
Oh, so it's over.
Still, yeah.
So choose careful.
Queen.
Queen.
Mark's got
So you go to Vegas.
It's like individual.
Something is not right.
That means that, Linda, I've lost 13 out of 14. What are the odds of that? So let's do the quiz anyway. So Mark steals the check from Luke, forges a signature, and transfers the check to Andrew's Widgets for value. Unaware that the signature is not Luke's, Andrew's Widgets presents the check to Kirksville Friendly Bank. Maybe we should put Friendly Bank in quotation marks. And they cash the check. Luke discovers the forgery and insists that the bank recredit his account. So the question is, who can recover from whom? So Luke, who can you recover, or can you? They credited your account, which means they've taken the money out of your account. What do you say, Luke?
I could definitely recover from Mark.
Okay, so from Mark. So Luke from Mark. But Mark, I think there's a practical problem with that. We can't find you. You've disappeared. So you can recover from Mark. Can you recover from the bank? And Andrew was a bank negligent.
Yes.
Yes. The bank was negligent because they didn't check the signature, therefore also from the bank. Now, Aaron, it's not practical that the bank check every signature that comes through, but it's also reasonable to impose the duty on them. And for the bank, it's just something like this is simply a cost of doing business. Now, look, who can, if anybody, can the bank recover from?
From Andrew.
From Andrew? Andrew, what did you do wrong?
From Mark.
From Mark.
I got confused.
From Mark. Okay. Jasmine, you agree?
Yes.
Okay, let's look at today's notes. Hazel, again, reminded me to post the notes. Hazel, I'm just going to put you in charge of the notes. And as we go through, Aaron, since you're taking notes on the computer, I'm going to make some corrections as I go through because I really need a proofreader.
Okay.
But then, if you make the corrections on the computer, there's no record of the mistake. Except Linda's back there. Okay. First, we begin with some definitions. I'll reverse the order of the two chapters because it makes sense to talk about secured transactions before we talk about debtor creditors. And then after we talk today, Andrew will talk about secured transactions, and then we'll talk about debtor creditors. And then next week, we'll talk about the sky falling down, which is bankruptcy. So it's a natural order. So, let's see. First, some definitions. Secured party is any creditor who has security in the debtor's collateral. The debtor is the one who owes the debt. Security interest is interest in the property which secures or guarantees the debt. Security agreement is the document that creates the security interest, and collateral is the subject matter, what is pledged for the debt. Financing statement is filed typically with the local courthouse, which gives notice to all that there is a security interest. Creation of a security interest. To become a secured party, the first thing one must do is attach a security interest to the owner, to the property of the debtor. There are three requirements to attach. One is to have an oral agreement with possession. Aaron, what's that mean? So you and I have an agreement, and it's oral, but it doesn't have to be in writing because I have
The actual
the actual thing. And Aaron, I'm thinking that a classic example of this would perhaps be a pawn shop. Or enter a written agreement which specifically describes the property. Notice that in both cases, there's notice to the world that the security interest exists. With the oral agreement with possession, there's notice to the world because I have Aaron's property. With the written agreement, there's notice to the world because we have specified what's there. Second, secured party must give value, i.e. consideration, but market could be antecedent debt. That is, it could be old consideration. And the debtor must have some legal right in the property. So, for example, Aaron, you could not pledge Luke's property. Example, Ariel, a farmer, takes out a loan and pledges next year's crop. Ariel, can you do that? That is, that's a future interest. The crops don't yet exist, but is it reasonable to assume that they will?
Yes.
And Caroline, would that be a typical arrangement for a farmer? That
Yeah.
is, you need money. You need money to buy seed to plant the crops, and therefore you pledge next year's crop. Yes.
What would happen if the crop fails that year?
The same thing that would happen if, for example, if you take out a car loan and the security for that car loan is the car and the car is stolen. So in both cases, the car does not exist, which means who's the loser? Well, in a sense, Ariel's the loser because her crop is gone.
Yeah.
But then the bank is also the loser because they have less security. But now, does that mean that Ariel is now off the hook to pay?
I don't believe so.
No, she's still, because if your car is stolen, you still have to make the car payments. But the bank has less security because the car is stolen. Okay. So let's look at example 31. Hazel, tell me about this one.
So basically, the guy is applying for a store credit card, and the store wants to retain the security interest in the good that he buys until he pays for it.
Okay, and Jasmine, is that basically it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Perfection of security interest. And notice this is different from attaching. Attaching, Aaron creates a secured relationship, but it doesn't perfect the relationship, which means that if your right has attached but not been perfected, you are in a lower category. In case, Andrew, this guy falls off, and what happens? You go bankrupt, and then everybody lines up to feed off the carcass. So to perfect it, there's several ways to perfect a security interest. One is by filing a financial statement, a financing statement, which contains, at a minimum, the debtor's legal name, a sufficient description of the property to notify the public, and word of file in a central location, such as Secretary of State. And here, Aaron, I don't mean John Kerry, I mean Secretary of State of Missouri. A little political humor there. John Kerry is the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
I bet you the 2 international students knew it and half the American students didn't. You didn't know who the Secretary of State was? Oh, we got that on record. Okay. You know, he's only had the job like for 3 years.
I don't follow politics very well.
That's why she's always smiling. If you did, you'd be depressed. Okay. So C, a financing statement is effective for 5 years or until the debt is paid off from the date of filing. This can be extended for another 5-year period if you do a continuation statement to attach to it within 6 months of the expiration date, which means, Aaron, that this financing statement could be good forever if every 5 years you attach, within 6 months of expiration, you attach a new one. So it could be indefinite as long as you do that. Okay. So then look at the Henry Baker case. Nick, tell me about this case.
So Angel sold 58 cows to the Bakers, and she gave a certificate for each cow with the cow's name, diagram of markings on the cow, and identified Angel as the former owner. 2 years later, the Bakers still owed Angel for the cows, so Angel attempted to perfect her security interest by filing a financing statement. And 22 of the cows were sold by the Bakers, but 16 of them were sold without an ear tag or tag numbers, or had tag numbers that did not match the financing statement that Angel filed. So when the Bakers filed for bankruptcy, they argued that Angel had not perfected security interest because the statement did not describe the cows in sufficient detail.
So the issue before us, Mark, is was the financing statement sufficient to identify the collateral? And let's think about how they were identified. They were identified by name. Name cows.
Well, they also, each name had all of their skin patterns.
And they also put ear tags on them. But over the course of time, ear tags would fall off or be damaged or so
Skin
forth.
patterns don't change, though.
So that a farm boy. So therefore, the court ruled, Mark.
They ruled in Angel's favor.
So basically, the document, and it seems like, Aaron, this is somebody trying to take advantage of a technicality.
Yeah.
So basically, they said, yes, this is good enough. I mean, what more could you have done than what you did do?
What does Angel get for
Right.
court home method?
Well, the cows don't like that. Yes.
What does Angel get for court home? The cow back?
Well, no, the only issue before the court is whether the financing statement is valid or not, which has to do with the pecking order in the bankruptcy.
Oh.
So therefore, if we did not have a good financing statement, then this creditor would fall to the end of the line,
Okay.
and other creditors would move up. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And Jasmine, when the sky falls off, that's when the sky falls, when there's a bankruptcy and the Earth goes out of its orbit, then that means that people are going to line up to take, and often in fact, usually in a bankruptcy, Andrew, there's not enough assets to satisfy the creditor, so we have to have some sort of pecking order of who gets what. And that's largely what this is about. Okay, so what happens in the case of an improper filing, and this is sort of related to this. Kelly, tell me about the case 32.
So essentially, there's this business called RJ, and they own a lot of subsidiaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went to the Regions Bank to get a security investment on their assets. And so there were too many subsidiaries for all the blanks, so they just, Regions, attached a blank sheet of paper with two of the subsidiaries, Avstar and Camtech, just written, I guess, to claim, but there was no tie to the original statement. So the Region tried to claim when R&J went into bankruptcy, Region tried to claim that they had a valid statement, and therefore it was perfected, so they had a official.
So the question here is, so this is the four corners of the document, and this is the financing statement, and we list two of the debtors. And then, as you said, there's not enough room, although it seems like to be plenty of room. But notice this statement also describes the description of the property and the creditors, and so it is conceivable they could have run out of room. And then they said, oh, okay, we've got some more debtors, and so we'll just add a separate piece of paper. So I guess the question here, Aaron, could be to take it out of this out of this context and put it in a more generic context is, when do these separate pieces of paper become part of this document? Does that make sense? When do these pieces of paper become part of this document? Because Kelly, as you said, there's no evidence connecting these pieces of paper to this document. And Aaron, it seems like we have the same issue in a basic contract dispute. That is, you and Luke have a contract, and you add, and you've got signatures here, and then you add additional pages. And Kelly, the court ruled that this was a perfected document, or it was not?
Was not.
It was not, because it was incomplete. Now, it was as to these two, but not as to these. So, Aaron, who's the loser?
The loser would be the bank.
And the winner would be these folks?
Yeah.
Hmm. And so, Aaron, what could they have done?
The bank.
Yes.
I think that the book mentioned that they could have wrote some more information on the paper rather than just writing the two names of the subsidiaries and stating that they are additional debtors. If they would have added that on the document, then it would have helped.
So at the top of this page, they could have written that this is part of the financing statement dated blah, 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 and so forth, to tie to that.
Yeah.
The other thing they could have done, and you see this often in contract law, is at the bottom of this page, just say, Kelly, there were 3 pages altogether. We could have said 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and then 3 of 3. And then there is at least evidence, Kelly, that there's more to this financing statement than this, because Jasmine, as it is, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, and remember the objective of the financing statement is to give notice to the public. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, Aaron, this is it.
Yeah.
The other thing they could have done, which probably would not be as easy, but not that much more difficult, is they simply could have done 2 financing statements. But then, Aaron, what issue does that raise? Which one takes priority over the other? And how would you determine that, Andrew? If you have 2 financing statements, and it would ultimately be the case, Andrew, that the debtor would pledge security to, particularly if they have financial problems, would pledge security to more than one
Go in order of date.
by date.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kelly, does this seem like a reasonable outcome? I think so, and because it seems like to me the bank was negligent, and you think with all their lawyers they would get this right. Okay. Perfection without filing by possession, and here, see example 34, and Aaron, do you have that example, page 581? And just to connect it to the ebook, I think, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, although you don't have page numbers, you can find example, what is it, example 30.4, and I assume there's a search.
Oh, yeah, I do have that.
So you could search for that?
I just use my regular book. I never use it.
Oh, well, but who's
I
using
think
the
it's
ebook?
easier.
So you could just search for that? Example 34?
I probably could.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I remember this.
Okay.
And this one, they transferred a note possession to the debtor in order to pay for a medical procedure.
And so the note itself was so it's a negotiable instrument, and so the note itself is an asset.
Yes.
So therefore, so we could think of it in terms of a negotiable instrument, but in this case, we're thinking of it in terms of this another asset that's being pledged. And so therefore, we have perfection by possession. And again, the classic example of this is the pawn shop. And then there's perfection without filing, something called a purchased money security interest. A purchased money security interest, a PMSI. Purchased money security interest, And Andrew, that's a mouthful, but what it basically means is if you use the loan to buy the item. So you use the loan to buy it. So it's a purchase money. That is, they're giving you money to purchase something with, and it's security interest. And that is given, Hazel, that's given priority over everything else. Why? Consider the purpose, the objective of the UCC. The objective of the UCC, Kelly, is to facilitate commerce. For example, we saw earlier, Kelly, that the UCC is more liberal about what is and is not a contract. And Aaron, in terms of missing terms, well, the common law on the contract will not throw the missing terms because there's no meeting of the minds. The UCC, Andrew, will because it wants to facilitate commerce. So, Kelly, if you go to the store and you buy something, you ought to be able to buy it without having to go to the courthouse and see if there's a security lien on the thing that you buy. And Hazel, if every time you bought something, you had to check and see if there were any other creditors, then commerce would come to a standstill. So it makes sense to give priority to the purchase money security interest, and I think, Aaron, that is consistent with here, in this problem, the quiz problem, the loser is a bank, and therefore this is simply part of the cost of doing business. So, for example, Mark, we know that if you sell stuff on credit, you're going to have a certain amount of bad debts, and you factor that into your pricing structure, and so forth. So, Andrew borrowed $1,500 from Aaron to pay for a vacation, placed in his car. Andrew used the money to pay for a vacation in Idaho. You ever been to Idaho? I've always wanted to go. Gilcrease is from there. He tells me it's a beautiful place. Everybody been to Idaho?
I've been.
You been to Idaho? Beautiful place?
Parts of it. We drove through the entire state.
North to south? South to north? It's a long state.
Yeah. We were driving up to the Canadian border from Vegas.
It stays in Vegas, too.
Well, we flew into Vegas and then we drove the entire coast.
Yeah.
We drove up to Twin Falls, and once we got there, it was gorgeous.
So it's worth the trip?
To go to Twin Falls, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, as long as you get about everything in the area.
It's on the record now. So this happens on October the 1st. On October 5th, Aaron files a proper financing statement. Answer the following questions. Aaron and Andrew, when does the interest attach? October 1st, because to attach means that he provided value, etc., etc., etc. Now, when is it perfected, Andrew?
Wouldn't it also be October 1st, time of sale?
No, it'd be October the 5th, the date that she did the filing statement.
That's what I had for that actually, because it says a PMSI and consumer good is said to be perfect.
But you think about this. Was this a PMSI? Because you didn't get the loan to buy the car, you already own the car. You got the loan to take a vacation and you pledged the car as collateral. So therefore it's not a PMSI because the object of the loan was not to buy the vehicle. The object of the loan was to see beautiful Idaho. Which means, Aaron, that it's not perfected until you do the financial statement because there's no notice to the world. Which means, Mark, what does that mean? What is her status on October 2nd? She's a secured party with an attached interest, but which has not yet been perfected.
Yeah.
Which means, Mark, that if you suppose that the loan was on October 1st, and let's suppose that Mark also made a loan and perfected it on October the 2nd. And then, let's suppose that Erin perfects her loan on October the 5th. Then Mark beats you, even though Mark's loan may have been a day after your loan, because Mark got to the courthouse faster. That makes sense? Erin, why did it take you 4 days?
I don't know.
Planning a wedding.
Yeah, I was trying to get Hazel. She was really bright.
So Andrew, we've answered the next question. Is this a PMSI? And the answer is no, because the purpose of the loan was vacation. Now, how would your answer be different, Aaron, if he gave you the car keys until repayment?
Then the interest would be attached and perfected on October.
Because you have possession. And you would take over Mark because
I beat him.
you have it. Now, Andrew, you agree?
Yeah.
Andrew, how would your answer be different if Andrew used the loan, the proceeds to buy the car? Now it would be a PMSI, and therefore, Aaron, your security interest will be perfected on October 1st.
So this 4 and 5 are essentially the same results. Attached.
For different reasons, yes.
Yeah.
Good, yeah. Same result for different reasons. Now, if it's a PMSI, Aaron, do you want to file a financing statement anyway?
I would say so.
Why?
Just to have good record of it.
And it's kind of like double entry bookkeeping. That is, you've got the PMSI contract, but what if that contract is lost?
Yeah.
Then it's nice to have a backup just in case. Because eventually, Jasmine, what's going to happen?
Yeah, you can,
We will have bankruptcy because the sky's going to fall in. So, Jasmine, you know what started this Facebook war between my wife and sister? My sister spends $3,000 for shoes. And then she feels guilty about it, so she gives them to Goodwill. And then apparently her husband is annoyed by this, and so she calls us at 6 o'clock in the morning and says, "Can I come live with you?" And my response is, "No, Julie, you need to stay and work it out with Everett. You know, you've got many years invested in this marriage. I'm sure it'll work out." My wife says, "Hell no." My wife says, "Why don't you go live with your daughter who lives 10 miles away?" She doesn't want me either. So that leads into a fight about who's the better daughter. And it's like, Hazel, the American's never going to win that argument. Okay. The scope of a security interest, proceeds of the cash or property received when collateral is sold or disposed of. A security interest in collateral gives the secured party a security interest in the proceeds acquired from the sale. After acquired property that the debtor acquired after the execution of the security agreement. An example of this Luke would be like if you have a revolving line of credit, you're a merchant, and you have a revolving line of credit with Mark's Bank, and so you make the agreement today, but that would cover, Mark, not only the original purchase, but since it's a revolving line of credit, it would include property that he buys in the future with this revolving line of credit. And then the priorities. If more than one person is claiming the property, UCC provides with the following priority. First, priority goes to a buyer in the ordinary course of business who is buying inventory for a merchant in good faith without notice of of other security claims. Second priority goes to a holder of the PMSI. Third priority goes to perfected security interest. And so let me make sure everyone understands the difference in number 1 and number 2. So Hazel comes to your store. So and she buys one of your products.
Sure.
And she's in the ordinary course of business.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, you had taken out a loan from Mark's Friendly Bake to buy the merchandise. So he is a PMSI.
Yep.
So he would have priority over everybody else except for Hazel. And Hazel is buying the ordinary course of business. So what if there's no debt involved here between you and Hazel? What if Hazel simply pays you cash? So the debt is between you and Mark, but Hazel pays you cash.
Mm-hmm.
She's still a customer in the ordinary course of business. And Kelly, we still want to give her a preference because we want to encourage commerce, and the ordinary customer walking into a store to buy a computer shouldn't have to check and see the financial status of the of the store. Okay. Third priority are perfected security interests. Yes.
What does ordinary course of business mean?
It's somebody who does business. I think sometimes the law uses Latin terms and sometimes they use obscure terms. I think in this case, ordinary course of business means ordinary course of business. Who is buying inventory from a merchant in good faith. So therefore, if you were dealing with a wholesaler, Aaron, you would not be an ordinary course of business because it's a regular customer who's buying something in ordinary course of business. So again, you walk into the store and you buy a computer from Mark, you should not have to check his his credit status to be able to have good title to your computer. So therefore, she has priority over the other creditors.
Why does it change it to wholesaler?
Because you're not the theory here is that the merchant has a greater obligation and therefore bears a greater burden, and you know that over a period of time you're going to lose, and you factor that into your pricing model. While the customer,
Yeah. So where would they go to order someone who, like a merchant who bought from a wholesaler?
it depends whether it's a PMSI or a perfected security interest, or
Okay.
so it sort of depends on where you are. So therefore, if the purpose of the loan was to buy the inventory that you then sold to Jasmine, then you would have a PMSI. Because the purpose of the loan was to buy the property.
I would
that
be
was
more
mutual.
important than the wholesaler that you bought it from, using.
No, you're the wholesaler.
Oh, I thought it was the bank.
I thought he was a bank.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're the bank.
Well, what if she took a loan from me, the bank, bought inventory from a wholesaler, and then sold it to a customer in ordinary business?
Then you would have,
The PMSI.
so therefore, the customer in the ordinary course of business would have first priority, and then the bank would have second priority because the bank has a PMSI.
Okay.
And then the wholesaler would have, but you see, in this case, I think the wholesaler's already been paid.
Oh,
Yeah.
because he got the money from
Yeah.
the bank.
So I think the wholesaler's out of the picture.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I amended unclearly by making Mark the wholesaler and the one providing the credit. So you sold your merchandise.
We do both.
Oh, okay.
But so you're both.
We're in all in one store.
Well, that's where they do business in Idaho. But if you took out a loan to pay him, then I think you're gone.
Okay.
You got the money. In that case, you got the money. And then the fourth priority is a holder of unperfected security interest, which is, Aaron, what you would have been here in this case from October the 1st and October the 5th. You're a secured creditor without a perfected security interest. Fifth priority is the debtor herself. Note that within each class, priority is given to the first in time in the group. So again, Andrew, we talked earlier about a rush to the courthouse. You want to file your security interest as soon as possible. So Hazel is an appliance retailer borrowing money from Friendly. And would you make a correction here? Would you put Friendly in quotation marks? Because there are no friendly banks. So Hazel, an appliance retailer, borrowed money from Friendly Bank to purchase a new line of refrigerators selling in the store. To secure their loan, Hazel gives the bank a security interest in her inventory. Jasmine buys one of the refrigerators. Hazel defaults on the loan. Can the bank seize Jasmine's refrigerator? Jasmine, what do you say?
I would say no because aren't I
You're
the
a customer
ordinary?
in the ordinary course of business. And you're safe. But now, Hazel, can they come after the refrigerators that are still on your show floor? Yes, because...
Because the second priority goes to the president.
Now, what if Hazel wasn't a store? What if she took a loan, bought the bank, and then took the money from the loan to buy it from a retailer, and then I bought it from her? Like I went to her house and bought the refrigerator.
So let me see what happened now. So let me diagram this. So she's not a merchant.
She's not a merchant. She takes a loan to buy a refrigerator because they're
So
expensive.
here's the bank, and they make a loan to Hazel.
Yeah.
Is it a PMSI?
Well, yeah, because she used the money to buy a refrigerator.
And then Hazel sold it to you?
Yeah. And then she defaults on her debt. Can they take it from me? Since she wasn't a
Yes,
merchant?
because it's not in the ordinary course of business, and you took it because she's not a merchant, and you took it with the fact with a defect.
Okay.
Now you then could turn around and get your money back from Hazel.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But notice that's different, and I think, Mark, we can justify that. Jasmine was given more protection than you were, because Jasmine is dealing with a merchant, and when you buy a used car off a used car lot, you expect more protection than when you buy a used car from your neighbor. And that's basically what you're doing here. You're buying a refrigerator from your neighbor. Good question. So we've decided that, Jasmine, your refrigerator is safe. Yours is not. And Hazel, you better pay up. Yes.
If Hazel is a merchant, then Mark,
If Hazel's a merchant,
then Mark's refrigerator cannot be taken by the bank. But if she is, no.
so if she's a merchant, then Mark is a customer in the ordinary course of business.
So the refrigerator cannot be taken.
That's right, because, well, that's the same example as in the notes.
Yeah.
The modification, though,
So they can't. How do you know?
and the answer, and the question is, how did he know? And the answer is, he didn't know. However, he did not know, probably
Did he
does
have a
not
duty
know,
to know?
but could he have known? Yes, because the bank's loan is a matter of public record, and the bank's security interest is a matter of public record. So therefore, he could have done what is called sometimes due diligence. He could have done due diligence. For example, if you ever buy a house, one of the things that you're assigned is that, or buy or sell a house, is that you've done due diligence, which means that you made sure that there's no defects in the title, and so forth and so forth. And in fact, when you buy a house, there's something called title insurance. So let me do a digression on this, and then compare it to this refrigerator. So let's suppose that I buy a house from Linda, and let's suppose that Linda's grandfather stole it 50 years ago. Now Linda does not know this, and then Linda sells the house to you. Now you don't. There's no notice of this, but then the person that Linda's grandfather stole the house from, now comes forward and says, I want my house back. You're going to lose.
Yeah.
However, what you could do is go to a title company and buy title insurance. And when you buy title insurance, what they will do is they will search the records for you. And for a fee, they will provide you insurance. That if anybody comes up and challenges the title, then they will reimburse you.
Oh.
That makes sense. Now, basically, in Mark's example, we have exactly the same scenario. That is, there's a defect on the title because there's a security lien on the title. The difference is that I don't know that you want to go to all that trouble for a refrigerator.
Yeah.
You would go through that trouble for a $200,000 house.
Yes.
But, and you're right, you probably don't know, but you could have known.
So whenever you buy it from a non-merchant, you're supposed to check the title, technically.
Yes. And if you buy it without checking it, then let the buyer beware.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, Aaron, that you would have more protection in the ordinary course of business dealing with a merchant than you would have dealing with their next door neighbor.
Yeah.
And also, Luke, if you're dealing with your next door neighbor, you have other recourses. So watch your back. There's all kinds of things a neighbor can do. Which is why, Jasmine, I'm glad my sister lives in Alabama. Okay, so then what? So Andrew, what's next? Give me the facts of the next case. Next example. So.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, well, we just did a friendly bank loan, so it'd be Luke. Luke and Aaron, yeah, a friendly used car dealer financed a car in the amount of $20,000.
$20,000 car.
Aaron made a down payment of $10,000. Hazel accepted an interest in the car for $5,000 for services performed at the wedding.
So Hazel has.
$5,000 interest in the car.
So she has a $5,000 interest in the car.
Yes.
And Aaron, that would not be PMSI.
No.
Because the subject matter of the loan is her personal services in the car. And then.
Ariel performed repairs in the car for the amount of $1,000. But when the balance was $18,000, Aaron defaulted the loan.
Okay. So now, Aaron, you owe, how much do you owe? You owe the bank $18,000.
Yeah.
You owe Hazel $5,000, and you owe Ariel $1,000. And you defaulted the loan. So the friendly used car dealer waited 3 hours.
It's reasonable.
And then they repossessed the car, and then they sold it at auction. Andrew, for how much?
$22,000.
Sold at $22,000. So I've got $18,000 to the bank. I've got $5,000 to Hazel. Oh, this is like an accounting problem. And $1,000 to Ariel. Who gets paid first? Eh? Luke. Why Luke?
Because, well, it doesn't really tell us if it's perfected or not, but he was the first one.
But it's a PMSI.
Oh, yeah.
So it is perfected.
Okay.
So it's a PMSI. And so he gets $8,000, so we got $4,000 left. Now somebody is going to lose some money here.
Yeah.
So the question is, between Ariel and Hazel, who gets paid next? Ariel gets paid next. Because she has a mechanic's lien on the car. Now, obviously, in this case, Aaron, it is a mechanic's lien because, Ariel, you're a mechanic. But a mechanic's lien could be somebody who paints your house. That would also be a mechanic's lien. And then there's $3,000 left, and Hazel, you get $3,000. And then, Andrew, what's next?
The next question is, what if the net auction was $28,000?
Then, Hazel, this is good news for you, right? Because then, Luke will get 18. Ariel, you will get your 1. Hazel, you get your 5. And Aaron, did you look at the link I sent you?
I got a chance to.
Did anybody look at the link I sent you? The Vietnamese apple is worth every penny.
Yeah.
And then, 18.15, that means that's a total of 24, and you got how much at auction?
28.
So you're the one that repossessed, can you now take that 4,000 and put it in your pocket? No, because then it goes.
Would it have to go?
Goes
It
to
goes
the
back to
debt.
me.
Goes
Would
to
she
the
only
debt.
get the amount that she paid in, or would she get the total amount?
She'll get what's left.
So just get what's left. Even
No,
though
because she defaulted on the loan.
if she only paid, this is just me, she only paid $4,000 or $2,000.
And I paid a down payment of $10,000.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I lost my car.
Yeah.
Be more sympathetic.
Now, and then Aaron, the following example was, well, how would this be different if If is there a last one? So how would this be different if Hazel had done a financing statement? If Hazel had done a financing statement, then the order would be who? Luke would still be first
Yeah.
because he has a PMSI. Then Hazel would be next because Hazel, you have a perfected security interest. So Ariel, you should have done a financing statement too.
Where do the mechanics go in that? What category do they fall in?
They would be at the bottom, right ahead of the unsecured creditors.
Okay, so in kind of the ones.
So then Ariel would get, and then Aaron gets.
No, I think you
So I think the point of the story is that Hazel, by perfecting your financing, by perfecting your security interest, by doing a financial statement, then that puts you ahead of everybody but Luke, who is a PMSI. And Luke, you have the preference as a PMSI because the purpose of the loan was to buy the car. Very good. See you next time. So Linda and Andrew, can I see you a minute?
Yeah.